Greetings, YouTube. Back in 1987, the Talislanta role-playing game was introduced to the role-playing community, and it touted itself as being the fantasy game that had no elves. They were basically marketing themselves as a fantasy setting that was completely different from any of the Tolkien-like settings that were pretty much ubiquitous in the fantasy genre. I mean, look at D&D. It's always been a pseudo-medieval kind of Tolkien-esque world. I mean, we even had, quote-unquote, halflings. Not hobbits. Halflings. And it really succeeded in presenting itself as a completely unique continent. A world with no references of any kind to anything else that was available in the market in that day. And it went through several different editions. I own all of the original books that were printed in '87 or around that age. And I also have the hardcover of the 4th edition. And then just recently, like within the last year, the author has made all editions of the Talislanta game freely available online. I will put a link in the down part to the library where you can go and download these things. And one of the versions that was put out there that I never saw in print was the D20 OGL version. And so I took the opportunity to print it out recently and give it a read. In fact, I just barely got the document to print out because of a failing toner cartridge in my printer. And I decided to see how well did Talislanta work in the D20 system. That was basically my goal. I've read the system when I was younger. I reread it again in 4th edition version. I don't remember what year that came out in. Might be 2000, 2001, something like that maybe. But I wanted to see how well it translated into the OGL, because it's my favorite genre, favorite system for many different types of role-playing games. So I'm going to do a quick rundown using the table of contents and a few side notes as we go. The first section deals with the different geographic areas on the continent of Talislanta. We have the 7 kingdoms, which is kind of a confederation of a council, a city. Kingdoms ruled by a council, one from each kind of kingdom. The western lands, the wild lands of Zoran, the desert kingdoms, the eastern lands, the northern regions, the central regions, the southern rim, the far islands, and then a bit on the Talislanta cosmology. Then we have races and cultures. Now, in the original Talislanta, all the classes were racial classes. You didn't play, for example, in a fantasy setting, we weren't going to be playing a dwarf who happened to be a fighter. You would have been playing a dwarven fighter. That's what the race was. There are no dwarves in Talislanta, however. And they have some really wonderfully alien races in here. Nothing like you have encountered in Tolkien-esque like role-playing systems. Now, I kind of didn't agree with everything they did here. Most of it I thought was just fine, but they have a race in here called the Ariad, which are 2 different species of an avian race that is devolving into a fully humanoid walker. So essentially, they're losing their ability to fly, and they represented this atrophied vestigial flying ability by limiting them to only being able to fly for like 6 rounds at a time. That doesn't say vestigial flight to me. That says poor flyer, but not vestigial. For me, an atrophied atavistic flying trait is a glide. So if I were to run this race in a D&D setting, Talislanta or just an OGL setting, I would give them a 20-to-1 glide ratio with a light load, a 10-to-1 glide ratio with a medium load, and no glide ratio with a heavy load. Give them a speed of 60, probably good maneuverability. That, to me, reflects they're losing the ability to fly, but they can still get along somewhat with their wings. Now, one thing they did nicely in this is that the races are not balanced with each other. They freely admit this right out of the gate, that they don't balance against each other. Some have got the classic 2 good, 1 bad, or 1 good and 2 bad, or some have just a bonus to positive traits. And some of them have no trait bonuses at all, like humans, in that they have other bonuses. And I like that. I appreciate that. You don't always have to bow too deeply at the altar of balance in my book. In fact, there's a race in here which is called the Giant, Karakian Giant, I'm not positive. And they are very large. They are large, they're strong, they're great fighters, you know, barbarian type things. So you've got a whole bunch of, like, there's like 60-something pages of races in here and all the cultures that deal with them. Really good stuff, whether you're going to run a Talislanta game or you're looking for an unusual race for an OGL system. I think you're going to find something you can use here. Next, we have their take on the classes. Now, they have Barbarian, Magician, Rogue, Scholar, Scout, Trader, Warrior, and then some Prestige classes. Now, the Barbarian is not a Berserker like the core rules of 3.5 has. This is more of a outside society fighter, a barbarian, someone that lives in the hinterlands, a redneck, which is pretty much what barbarian means. Got favored terrains, fighter capability, so it's kind of a fighter ranger kind of thing going on here. And we have the Magician. I'll get to magic in a minute, but the Magician is broken down into different orders for like shamanism, wizardry, witchcraft, cartomancy, and using magical cards in a deck to cast magic. Rogue, pretty much the standard rogue. Scholar, skill-based character, all about different topics. For like, you can have a scholar that's focused on alchemy, one that's focused on technomancy, one that's focused on a really good knowledge of a specific or very tightly focused number of knowledge skills, a classic sage. Scout, rangery kind of character, no spells, directly no spells, but still with some fighting capability. Trader, this is a class all about the contacts. It's the FaceTime, folks. This is where you make the money. Warrior, which is pretty much just a reskinning of the fighter. It's kind of flavorless. I don't know why they didn't just call it fighter. Then we have skills and feats, which deal with, of course, new skills, new uses for old skills, and some new feats. Now, there was one feat in here I was a little confused about. It gives you a 500 gold piece bonus if you take it, plus a +1 bonus to a profession check. It's all about business contacts, essentially, you know? You get a windfall, I think that's what it's called. That's good for the first 2 or 3 levels, but after that, 500 gold pieces is meaningless. So I think it should be 500 gold pieces per level that you take the feat at. So if you take it at 10th level, you're getting 5 grand. That matters. I would still only allow it to have a +1 bonus profession, however, because that's a +1 to any skill is still useful no matter what, particularly if you're getting something else at the same time. Then we have equipment and trade goods, and the equipment and weapons and armor in this game are very flavorful. All of the illustrations in this book, I think, are quite interesting. I loved the artwork the first time I saw it in '87, and I still love it. Then we have magic, some game mastering selection, and an index. So, the magic. Every single class in this game can cast magic spells. What you have to do is you take a feat, an order feat, for example, wizardry or witchcraft or shamanism. That gives you access to the ability to cast spells. Each different kind of order, and there are numbers of them, like cartomancy, is dex-based. So if you have a high dex, you get a bonus for using your magic. Now, why do you need a bonus? Because this is a skill-based magic system. You succeed at your casting spells by rolling a skill check against the DC, the challenge rating of the spell itself, the difficulty challenge. Now, or difficulty check, sorry. You have to research your spells either by getting someone else to teach you, get it from a book, or you do the research yourself, and you have to expend experience points to get the spell in your memory. Add it to your spell book, whatever, what have you, however your particular order of magical knowledge processes a spell like that. So you're going to have a small number of spells at low levels, and even at high levels, you're probably not going to have a lot of them. Now, each spell, each order, also has different modes, and all the modes are the same for all the different orders, but they're used in different ways. And different modes, there are 12 of them, and they're like, for example, Alter, which is buffs and debuffs, Attack, it's pretty self-explanatory, Reveal, which is all about divination, Transformation, changing either a material object to another material object, or changing your form or the form of another. Now, all of this is based on like a DC 10. So a very base, quote-unquote, first-level spell would be a DC 10 or 11. Very simple, easy use, and you can cast the spells as often as you want to. There is no limit. There is a catch, however. Every time you cast a spell, you get fatigued. And every cast spell you cast after that, the challenge rating goes up by 1. So I cast that DC 11 spell, cool, not a problem. Next time I cast it, it's a DC 12. And then a DC 13 and a DC 14. And you get this fatigue removed by resting, sleeping, meditating, what have you, just like a standard spellcaster does in a Vancian system. Now, there are lots of things that can make these spells more powerful. So if you want to do a die 6 of damage to a guy across the room, that's a DC 11, no problem. However, you want to do that same die 6 damage to a guy that's a mile away, and you can, that's going to be like a DC 35 or 40. Harder to do. And because you're taking that penalty every single time you cast the spell again, it really is going to create a situation where spellcasters are going to cast the toughest spells early in the day and cast the easier spells later in the day, which makes sense in the real world. I know when I do a task, I always try to take the toughest thing when I'm fresh and save the easier stuff for later when I'm tired. Now, there are exceptions. If you have a con bonus, you get your con bonus in the number of spells per day you get with no fatigue. So if you get a con bonus of +3, because you're a very tough magic user of some variety, the first 3 spells you cast in a day, no fatigue at all. Don't count against you because you're tough. And if you succeeded your skill check by 10 or more points, for a case of an easy spell, no fatigue. You've essentially got a critical success with that spell. I like that. And if you roll a 1, bad things happen. And the screw-up chart that they use in this version is the same screw-up chart that they used all the way back in 1987. That made me smile when I realized that they were doing that. Kind of a ode to the past. So every class can be magic users in this. You have to have spellcraft points to learn the spells, and you have to have skill points in a mode to cast them. But as long as you're willing to sink those resources into your character, a rogue can be a spellcaster, a barbarian can be a spellcaster, a trader can be a spellcaster, any of them can. And a couple of the races have spellcasting ability built into them, like gnomes do, things like that. But the magician gets a bonus, quite a few bonuses, to being a spellcaster. So if you're going to be a spellcaster full-time, you become a magician, you pick which order you want to do, which kind of a magical tradition you have. And the different orders have different things. There's actual cartomancy using cards. You're not really good at the big flashy things. You're good at the subtle influence, divination, things like that. And you get a bonus to certain kinds of modes when you use them, and you get a penalty. Your DC is higher when you get other kinds of mode use. So it's a fairly flexible system. It's self-regulating. The person can't cast spells forever because they're going to get more and more fatigued. There are ways of mitigating this, of course, through healing and through magic means and such. But any game has workarounds. So I think this is a very useful resource to anyone that likes the OGL D20 system. It's very alien, and I think it's almost too alien for my taste. I've never been able to project myself into the Talislanta system and really see myself playing a character. I don't invent characters when I read these rules. And I do that almost every other role-playing game I've ever read. But this game, there are no tigers and lions and bears, oh my. It's a completely alien world, and I find that a little disconcerting, but that's just me. You may be craving that. Now, I'm going to put a link in here. You can go get every single bit of the Talislanta universe for free. So your buy-in is 0 here, folks. So if you want to go look at the art for nothing else, go do it. It's worth your time. The rules are solid. There are people who have all the people who favorite all the different editions of this game. I think the 4th is probably one of the better versions for their straight rules. But overall, it's a great system.